on to getting YouTube going here.
Okay.
So I'll be right back.
And tell me if you prefer me to have my headset on. I've got them right here. I'll just use my little iTunes, these kind of guys.
I think you sound great.
Okay. Okay. Good. It's more comfortable.
Excellent. Okay. So we have 37 people joined us. Thank you for coming. If you have questions throughout our talk today, feel free to post them on the Q&A board or the chat. I'll look at both for us, and then we'll take some questions later on in our talk. But please let me introduce my friend Victoria Moore. And this is the first time she and I have actually seen each other, which is really precious. And I'm so glad to see you for the first time. We've got to talk all these years, but not actually see one another. And so I want to introduce you to Victoria. She's an incredible mystic and teacher. Her passion is helping people process, helping people learn how to meditate, helping people reach enlightenment. And we're going to talk about what both of us experienced for solstice, what is unfolding from solstice today. But we're also going to talk about some of the basics that are coming up for us to look at closely again. And we always have to spiral back on the basics to relearn what is the true basics to keep you on the path of enlightenment. But also, all of us always can have a good fresher. Many of us have holes, even though we've been doing some of these basics for ages. But thank you so much for coming, Victoria. I'm really glad to see you and have you here.
Thank you for having me. I hope the fact that it's dark, it's late.
Yes, because you're hailing from South Africa right now.
That's right.
Which
That's
is
right.
very special. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here with you and everybody. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm here in the Blade River Canyon, which is a very powerful vortex. It's in the southern hemisphere, so it is. Oh, somebody says hard to hear me.
Yeah, you want to pop your headset on and see if that works better?
Yeah, let me
Great.
do that.
We're all totally happy to work it out.
Sorry. Okay. Is that better?
Oh, yes, very much. Thank you.
Okay, good. So, okay, Anda. Great, good. Yeah, so it's southern hemisphere, so it's winter. The last solstice was our winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. And I am 9 hours ahead of or 10 hours ahead of the West Coast, 6 hours ahead of the East Coast. So it's 6 o'clock here right now, and it's totally dark, totally dark. It's nighttime because it's wintertime, and we're just coming out of the shortest day of the year. So
very glad to feel that Blade River Canyon energy. I've always felt it to be very, very large and very steady. Steady energy. What are some of the things that you'd like to talk about when it comes to solstice?
Okay.
Well, let's just jump right in.
Yeah.
It was really interesting.
It was. I thought it was, well, first of all, I have this one friend who was complaining to me. She said, I'm so tired of hearing, oh, this is like the most powerful solstice we ever had. Twice a year, every year. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you understand that solstices and equinoxes are, mystically speaking, exceptional days. There's a certain kind of lineup with the cosmos that that is the way one of my mystical teacher, Rama, used to talk about it, the veils between the worlds thin. The veils between the dimensions become more transparent. And because of the fact that the vibration of the planet is continually speeding up, that every solstice is in its own unique way the most powerful we've ever had, because at least in our lifetimes, um, I don't know, 10, 20,000 years ago, they may have been very different. But for
Right.
us, and also in 2012, we were in that alignment that was so perfect. Well, those outer planets move very slowly. So even though each subsequent solstice since 2012 has been a little further and further away from that alignment, it's still pretty darn close on the outer,
Oh, yeah.
from the outer planet perspective. So so this was just like the last, very powerful, I felt.
Yeah.
My experience of it, though, was that, well, first of all, I wrote about this too in my email. I felt like when it was 40 days and 40 nights before the solstice, I felt something, I felt something. And mystically speaking, that 40 days and 40 nights is significant, not just Christ with 40 days and 40 nights out in the desert, but in many other traditions. There's, what are they, the 13 yoginis? In the Hindu tradition, there's that powerful group of yoginis. You're supposed to do that practice for 40 days and 40 nights. It comes up all over the place. So I felt this, I could feel this marker at 40 days, 40 nights prior. But the first 20 days, I found I was starting to feel like things weren't the way they had been, was beginning to feel off. And I needed to make some big changes. And it was kind of like, there was this slightly uncomfortable sense, because it's like it was like being forced to make big changes. But the minute I was willing to go, okay, I've got to blow this one up and start all over and do something different, all this energy and inspiration and joy came in, and all this capacity to really see something new, which was way cool, right? And then when it was interesting, I had a meditation set up, and a couple of days prior, I got this download. It was like, you just have to get as many people as possible to come to this meditation. So I went on to my least favorite place in the world called Facebook. And I made it a free event, and we had close to 70 people,
Oh,
which
good.
was spectacular, because having that many people come together with a rather, the intent was, it was a high intent too, because everybody understood that the point was that the more of us coming together on at a power time like that, with me sitting in this power spot, holding space from this power spot, the more of us that come together, the more it uplifts everybody. So there was this energy of wanting to be there, not just for myself on everybody's part, but for what it's going to do for the group and what it's going to do for the world. So it was a profound meditation. There were lots of downloads. There was this sense at one point, I wanted most of the meditation to be in silence.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be talking the whole time. I just talked a little bit in the beginning, just to get everybody opened up in their bodies and aligned and all of that. And we were in silence for, the exact transit, and for about 20, 25 minutes. But at a certain point, towards the 25-minute point, I had this powerful image of I had to just suggest to everybody to open their crown and open their root and allow the frequencies from all the directions to come right into the heart and from there to explode out. And it was a cosmic event. That's all I
Yeah.
can say. And it was interesting because one of the people on the call was a seer also, or a medium she
Mhm.
is. And she had gotten that guidance right before I spoke it. Because I was sitting there going, I really don't want to talk. I'd like us to stay in silence. But no, you have to say this. So it was very cool. And since the solstice, I have felt that I have felt there's a pretty significant shift going on in the planet. I mean, who would have thought Marianne Williamson would have been up on the debate stage for the Democratic Party?
Ah, fascinating, isn't it?
It's fascinating, yes. So,
Yeah.
not that the solstice caused it, but that's part of this big shift that's going on. And I felt it was a real point of, it was a pivot point. It was a pivot point, this last solstice.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you
So,
were led to bring in all those energies from the heart and then expand them out.
mm,
And,
mm.
it reminds me of something I used to do a lot, and now I've taken it back up to do it again, is to build pillars of light.
Oh, right. I remember when you started doing that.
Yeah, I used
Yes,
to do that.
fantastic.
And
Yeah.
so we did one in Crestone, and it was so beautiful. And we made it huge. We made it 100 miles across. And
Wow.
it was built for bringing galactic consciousness to humanity as a beautiful gift. And the
Mm.
perfect right people were there, and the perfect right soul essences took part. And then after solstice on Sunday, I had my circle call. And since then, for those of you who heard me that I was having a scratchy throat, I've been laid out with a head cold.
Oh,
Might
well.
still hear it a little bit.
Mm.
It's worse at the end of the day after I've been talking all day. But the that's okay. It's the solstice sniffles. um,
Yeah.
on Sunday, we built a pillar of light again, and we did it that day. My calls are free too on every month, and we there was about 100 people came, and we built a pillar of light in the Pacific Ocean to support the cetaceans and the waters of the earth.
Oh, beautiful.
And we'll get to do one. Oh, apparently this bad cold has been happening to everyone, so I didn't
Mm.
escape. But we'll be able to build lots more pillars of light now, and it's so interesting how that kind of leads a little bit into basics, because that's such a beautiful basic thing we can do, right? Is project our light, and
Yeah.
simply just allowing all the energy to come in and then being able to project that. It's a very real human attribute. It's a wonderful attribute we have. Definitely.
Mm.
I love
So,
that.
yeah. So, I mean, you're like one of my favorite seers. So,
Thank
what
you.
did you see about that
This
last
was
solstice?
super intense. So we had been preparing, we being my teacher Lucia, my friend Jonna, and I, we visit everyone every once in a while. We've been
Mm.
tracking a whole bunch of stuff together for a while. And in a way, what we had been seeing was this interesting metaphor where everybody's looking at the waves on the surface, right? They're all getting crazy. Like financial
Mm.
systems getting crazy, and political systems are getting crazy. But anyone who studies mysticism knows that everything on the surface is simply surface, and that there's an energy underneath that's really what you're going to want to look at. It's almost like this big sea serpent is the one causing all the waves on the surface, but the sea serpent is really what you want to pay attention to. not the waves. The waves are a clue that there's that underlying power and energy going on. And we were joking about how the Kraken has awakened. So this energy sort of underneath everything shaking up, and what does that look like on the surface? Everything from full disclosure happening to finances, economies, politics, all that is the surface. And so our interest has been, well, what's really going on underneath all of that? And it's Mother Earth. It always has been. It's Mother Earth. She's the one who has drawn the wild cards, brought on energies that weren't really timed to be on yet. And she said, nope, I'm sick and tired of all the density, and I'm going to keep raising my frequency and to shake things up. And when you shake stuff up, right, boulders come to the surface, big rocks and chunks come to the surface to be seen. And so what I saw was that this was an individual experience for sure, that we're all going to have those boulders come up. For me, certainly it has occurred. Everything, the two biggest things for me coming up to the surface about health. I can't live like a 21-year-old anymore. I can't like sleep for 2 hours and then work all day, like I used to be able to, or just that kind of stuff, or eat crappy food here and there just because I want to, or drink alcohol anymore. All that has to go. And being willing, right? Being willing to say, all right, here's my boulder, and I'm ready to dissolve it, doing the processing to dissolve it. That's really key. So we're preparing for this, and Lucia and Jana and I got into a bit of a triad, which can be really fun at certain gateway points like solstice time. You can get into circles or groups or whatever to do that work. And we were intending to align our energies, our essences, and just allow whatever was the most beneficial light to come through us. That was the intention. So I woke up and I felt like crap on solstice day. And for here, it was about 10:30 something, 10:37 or something like that in the morning. So
I think it was 10:58.
Yeah, exactly. So
right close to the hour. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was okay, great. So yeah, it was in the morning. Yeah. I was miserable. I did not feel good. And so I was like, well, this is obviously, there's a reason why I'm not feeling good. So I went outside and I grounded myself on the ground. I got into a cross-legged meditative stance next to my little stream on my property that I'm so blessed to have. And I just dropped in, and it was so dense and I was like, wow, here I thought I've done work on my ego. And I'm like, nope. Let solstice show you just how much you've done or how much you haven't done, right? And I'm like, geez, like this ego is really uncomfortable. I was just miserable, full body pain. And I'm sitting there like, all right, I gotta find Lucia and Jana. So I see them, and it was really interesting because it was like a ray of light shining down through water, right? And it kind of opened up like this door, and there's Lucia and Jana waiting for me. And I'm feeling like I'm crawling up a muddy, wet slope trying to get to them. I'm just like, man, you guys, my ego is just really heavy. And so I finally get into this light, and this light starts working on me. And by this time, solstice is full blown. And I'm like, we were supposed to get together with an intention, and I can barely function. So I'm in full body pain and agony. And I watched myself get laid out like a set of cards. Like all my subtle bodies got laid out. and I could see very clearly what was causing me pain was the resistance to this frequency, and that was making my ego shift up to the surface to be addressed. And so I said, okay, well, I didn't intend for this to be a personal experience, but obviously I have to do this or else I'm not going to get anywhere. So I intended for that dense part of myself not to be put back together with the cards. I don't think that's me removing ego exactly. It was a physical experience that had to happen so I could keep going. So I often say, like, I've been able to see how my ego will vibrationally separate itself, and then I'll give it a lawn chair and a margarita and say, you sit
Yeah.
you sit over there, man, because you can't interfere. And that's
Yes.
kind of what happened. And so finally I welcomed any subtle bodies that were willing to take on this frequency to come back into myself, and instantaneous pain went away. I felt great. And I was like,
Mm.
holy cow, that was amazing. So I was finally in this state that was going to be functional, and we start moving up into the dimensions, and as a seer, I've had to learn that just because I see it doesn't mean I've embodied it. And that's very important because that keeps us seers in check. Otherwise, we think we know everything. So I'm traversing the dimensions with Lucia and Jana. We get up to these higher dimensions. We're just maintaining them in our embodiment the best that we all can. It was very humorous. It was very sweet and beautiful. And then what I witnessed was interesting. What I saw was the bottom drop out of reality, and all of reality. And it was like this incredibly deep ocean that didn't really have a bottom. And I saw all the people, all the souls deciding which level they were going to remain at. Are they going to remain in the depths where there is no light? And all that pressure and that density, are they going to rise up and deal with what comes when you end up rising up? I've never done any scuba diving, but my brother has and Lucia has. And when you rise up too fast, it can kill you. You end up, the air in your body expands.
Right.
And so it, I saw that all these people were going to be very uncomfortable because their energy fields were going to expand, and that if they were willing to keep going, that if they were willing to do it slow and steady, but deal with the discomfort, that they would be expanded in the light. And so then there's the surface to this energy and all that formless light that comes from source. And that's where we were lingering at this point, just watching all the different souls choosing what they were going to continue to experience. And then the most amazing thing happened. It was like Earth exploded. It's that word, exploded all of her light out through everything that was living or conscious, or, well, just anything. I mean, really everything has some kind of consciousness to it, but it was as if all the atoms released all their light. And so, like, I've got my eyes open at this point, and I'm looking at the plants and the water and all of the earth around me, and it's totally amazing. It was very psychedelic looking, all this energy pouring out. And I realized, oh, she's pushing all the density out of the way. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because a couple of years ago, you remember that Lucia and me and like maybe a couple other people saw this crazy event, this wild event where this black hole weapon or something like that pulled off the matrix of the earth, that we had all this extra help. It was very detailed. It was very impersonal.
It was 2 solstices ago, or
Yeah,
2 and
two
a half
solstices.
solstices ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
was
Two
winter.
and a
It
half.
was winter. Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah, and some people were like, "What? What are they seeing?" And
You're
others
crazy.
were like, "Oh, yeah." And what we realized was that that hadn't happened exactly. It was what was going to happen, and that it wasn't literal. It was absolutely a metaphor for what's happening now. The density of humanity and ego being pushed out of us, and that's the matrix. The matrix is something that we've created from within, and that shift, yes, we do have lots of allies and help. We have had that, and we still do. And it became a much more personalized seeing, because all these different individuals with their extra help, their guides, their support, then were able to shift that density more easily, and it all kind of glommed together in its own black hole. Like
Huh.
it was removed from the earth this time by the earth pushing it out and saying, this is the frequency that will remain here, and all the density coming to the surface to be then shifted into source or whatever. What does a black hole go to? Well, nowhere exactly. It just goes back to source. And it was so interesting because it dawned on us, all of us realized, oh, that's not exactly what happened last couple 2.5 times ago. It was a
Foreshadowing.
preview.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a preview for now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it all made way more sense at this
That does.
point.
Yeah. I was there. I was holding space for you all. I mean, I
Thank
remember
you.
that day.
Yeah.
I remember,
Yeah.
I had been tapped to help and I was just holding space for it. But what you're describing is what I've been seeing taking place over, yeah, ever since really it's been ramping up, but since 2012.
Yeah.
And, it's like because the vibration and yeah, Gaia is it's Gaia along with her buddies in the cosmos. I mean, it's Gaia's decision, but she's got her support team too, right? She's got
Yes.
her cosmic connections and all of that. But, she keeps um, shifting in frequency. It keeps ramping up. And if you're in resonance, it's great. If you're in dissonance, it sucks.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting, more and more like that. And that little experience that I had talked about where I was like feeling that there were some things, this was with the people I was working with and how things were running. It's like if it's just a little bit off, it gets so bad that you have to change it. And that's what's happening for everybody on the planet in their own way. Some people will just leave and work on it another time. But I really see a huge it's really a huge revolution in consciousness that
It
is
is
happening because
revolution.
more and more people are finding their own alignment with it. So yeah, I think it's great, and I think uh, fascinating, fascinating to perceive that black hole experience through how it connected to to what you see going on right now. Because
Definitely.
yeah,
And
yeah. I mean,
how it personalized it. Because
mm,
that other experience, what I had seen, was so impersonal. It was
mhm,
like,
mhm,
well, what about all the individuals on the planet? And that's not usually how how I see stuff. I'll see them as very personal because each
mm.
individual's consciousness is so unique. But this time it brought it all together. It just made it make
Cool,
more sense at this point. Yeah.
fantastic,
Yeah, I'm
great.
very glad. Well, that leads us to that personal alignment, right? What
Mm.
what does it take? What does it take to find that personal alignment? That's the basics, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Um, I mean, that's your spiritual path. That's your journey. That's your journey of awakening. And there are many forms of it. But yeah, what we were talking about just before we started was that, and I've been doing this for myself. Like Lucia, I started meditating close to 50 years ago. But I wasn't, the first year I was kind of because I was performer. I was a professional ballet dancer. And so I had, very weird schedule for 20 minutes twice a day, right? That was the type of meditation I learned. But yeah, so, and I've been through quite a journey with many facets to it. And but even in that case, what I'm finding is right now there's this call to spiral back onto the basics, which is why I set up this new program, Spiraling Back on the Basics. Not circling back, but spiraling back, meaning revisiting the basics like meditation,
Mhm.
processing, understanding the spiritual principles, understanding energetic etiquette, understanding energetic ethics, all these kinds of things. Um, that we can understand from the perspective of now, where the planet feels different. We've all had a lot of experience, but what I've noticed lately is that almost everybody, almost all of us have holes in our foundation, places where we've maybe missed something. We were like not in class that day. So that one thing we never quite got. And so I really feel that now is the good time to spiral back onto the basics in order to make sure that you've really dealt with all of these things so that as the energies shift and as we are all being given the opportunity to become more and more and more soul embodied, light, a physical body that is different, that is one that can embody fully on the planet, which is much less dense, a much more light filled physical body, which, has been one of my main passions for all these years is the
Yes.
physicalization of full body enlightenment,
I love
which
that.
I'm still exploring, but luckily, thank goodness, I have this amazing yoga teacher at Santa Fe, which I periodically go back to work with him because he gets it. There's like a renaissance going on in the fusion of movement and meditation,
Mm.
and it's subtler, it's deeper than even these great things like five rhythms and all of that. That's great stuff, but there's something even subtler, and it's fascinating to me. But anyway, even in my own journey, I have found myself spiraling back to the basics. And like I was telling you just before we started this call, when I first started meditating, it was transcendental meditation. And after that first year when I was still performing, I got really into it. And I almost immediately went off and became a TM teacher. And I was
Yeah.
initiating people in the meditation technique and all of that. And I went and spent a year in Switzerland with Maharishi. And
Oh, wow.
um, yeah, he actually knew me. That was a weird circumstance. My first experience being the lead person in a small group of women who were uh, we hadn't gotten the right second technique, so we couldn't get the cities yet. So
Mhm.
everybody thought it was because we were just terrible and that we were bad, but we couldn't get the cities, the sutras. We just had to read Patanjali all day, every day, which was amazing because I had one of the highest experiences I'd ever had doing that. But
Wow.
anyway, so I'd had this, these years of being in the TM world. But at a certain point, I had just sort of like felt like, this mantra is just getting in the way. I just want to go in.
Yeah.
And so, and for years, I've told people that, you know, at a certain point, I just didn't need it anymore or whatever. And I've kind of treated that particular meditation as a very basic beginner meditation. Well, just recently, I have come to perceive directly and clearly that actually what happened was that after about, I was probably six years into my meditation career, um, of doing it every day, twice a day, uh, that that mantra, which was a sound, you know, that's a sacred sound, had refined to become. Uh-oh, somebody says from Lynn Roots to all panelists. Where are you, Victoria?
Oh, don't worry about that. We'll look at the questions later.
Oh, okay. Well, I think she couldn't hear me, is what she was saying.
Oh, I think she's wondering where you're at. She's in South Africa.
Oh, I'm in South Africa. Yeah,
I
I
think
live in
she
South
joined
Africa.
us
That's
through
why
the
it's dark.
winter. Yeah,
It's
that's why.
night here. Night in winter here.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I had discovered, though, what I saw was that what had happened is that that mantra, which had been at the vibration of subtle sound, transcended into a frequency that was more subtle than sound.
Mm.
And that's what I've been all these years when I felt like somehow I'd been gifted with this ability to just move into the state of the unmanifest. Well, it was because of that mantra
Yeah.
becoming so subtle that it was not a sound, but it was a frequency that would take me into the depths. And with all the other meditations I learned with Rama, the Sushumna, and the chakras, and Leslie in the Cave of Brahman, and all these various methods of meditation that I've shared with people, the actually the ingredient that was allowing it to work was that very first meditation technique I'd learned. And um, and now that I've recognized it for what it is, it's brought me to a whole new level of depth in meditation too.
Yeah, and I can really see it. You can probably
Mm,
see I keep closing my eyes because I get drawn into it. It
mm.
this living golden light. It's really pleasant and really calming, like a
Yeah.
bath, and all the
uh,
cells of my body are hungry for it.
And it recalibrates your cells. It
Yeah, I can
recalibrates your
see that.
cells. It's really very fascinating. So yeah, so my journey is just continuing like everybody else. And
Yeah.
so that particular, and the other thing that I've taken on, which I won't talk too much about, but I had learned, you know, the sutras. Well, sooner or later, my little oddball group got to do them. Um, and the whole thing kind of, I don't know, as far as I was concerned, got out of hand when we were hopping around in full lotus, just kind of lost me there. But I've also been having those come back into my life in a different way, and it's very powerful stuff. So I think it's really good for all of us to spiral back rather, onto the basics to find um, just really basic things. Like I said to you earlier, I said, okay, which is going to be better? Which are you going to choose? 20 minutes twice a day, every day, or maybe 3 or 4 times a week, a big, juicy hour and a half serious meditation. And, you know, scientifically, with the plasticity of the brain, that simple 20 minutes twice a day actually is what changes the brain, it causes the corpus callosum, which is between the two hemispheres, to get more stronger and
Mhm.
bigger, which is the unification of the left and right hemispheres, which is a physical expression of unity consciousness, you know,
Yeah.
and all the other things, you know, there's so much scientific evidence, which I think it's important for people to know because um, that's going to inspire you to do maybe a shorter, maybe a half hour. I can't do 20 minutes. I just can't. It always turns into 40, but that's because my body is so conditioned to longer meditations. But um, daily and twice daily, if you can, is what causes these changes to take place. And this is so basic, this is not like higher, moving into the 12th um, chakra, and that's all wonderful stuff. But this basic stuff makes it really easy and spontaneous to have the kind of experiences that like moving up and being at the level of the eighth chakra and being in the eighth dimension. And I used to hang out there all the time, and I had to really get that into the body. So
Yes.
then the then the aura is
Yeah.
informed by by those, but it goes all the way down and underneath and into the planet and connects with Gaia. So yeah, so I'm very big on spiraling back on the basics, and not just meditation. That's just the first piece, but
Yeah.
all the other pieces. Um, we talked about some of this earlier too, you and I.
Yes.
Ethics,
The ethics
spiritual
are
ethics.
so important. And
Yeah,
I shared this random little story, but I'll share it with everyone here too, that here I come out of science, 10 solid years of really brutal academic training.
yeah.
And I get picked up by Lucia as a possible assistant, and she's interviewing me in person, and she asks me, what my spiritual experiences are, what are my psychic capabilities. So I start naming off all the crazy things I can do. Like, one of them, I think that this really triggered what she said to me, but I said that I can shake someone's hand and I can see into their past, right? And she looks at me and she says, "That's very rude." Um, this person knows the rules,
Yeah, yeah.
because here I'd had all this academic training, but no one had ever trained me how to be a good psychic,
Mm,
how
mm.
to truly use my gifts in service, besides running around trying to help people with haunted houses, um, or whatever. And I was like, I want this. I don't care if she's mean to me about it. I need to learn all the rules. I can handle it because I got yelled at lots of times in academia. I can handle
Yeah.
it. I can handle criticism. But I was like, I need the rules. I need to know, what are the parameters of this? What can I do?
Well,
What can't I do ethically?
yeah. Yeah. And the parameter, of course, in this one is you must always get permission from
Exactly.
somebody before doing it.
Always.
And that's not just you, that's true of all of the support beings that we're talking about.
Right.
We must give them permission. We have to invite them. The cosmic rule is you don't impose your will on somebody else. And that's really what you're doing, even if you're helping them.
Yep. You're right.
Unless they've invited you and asked for your help. Otherwise, you are, you're breaking the rules.
Yeah,
And
consent.
yeah.
Consent is key, and many of these beings don't understand consent. And
Mm,
I do believe that, being a human, one of the things we can do is teach them what consent is. Consent
mm.
and compassion, what those are, because a lot of these beings don't know those things. They don't have
Well, that,
their culture
yeah,
or agenda.
yeah. Well, that's another thing too.
That's a
God,
whole other discussion.
we can talk for hours, but yeah, I mean, that is so, I mean, listen, I've been in this realm and I've had lots of experiences, but I would have to say my caveat with everything is I'm not a world-class seer like you are. I mean, my seeing capacities have grown with my evolution, but I wouldn't say that that's my primary skill. But my understanding is that one of the most powerful aspects of being. There are two things that we have as humans. We have this thing called free will to play with. Now, my experience is that free will is actually an illusion, which ultimately, because free will ultimately becomes divine will. So then you realize that free will was an illusion all along. It's or a delusion, I would call it. But the other thing is we have this incredible emotional body. And my understanding, and like I said, I haven't gone and shaken hands with all these beings from other worlds to know this, but my understanding is that there are many beings from other worlds and other planets that are incredibly intelligent and incredibly evolved, but they don't have this phenomenal emotional bodies that we have. And it's, it's tricky, it's dicey. It's because we're in, the matrix of this world that we co-create is dualistic
Yeah.
and polarized. And so here's another piece of spiritual etiquette or energetic ethics. Whenever we judge somebody, whenever we judge somebody else, we are actually in that moment choosing to participate in creating polarized duality.
Yeah.
We all hear non-judgment, non-judgment, but when you see what's really going on, when we judge, and usually judgment comes from a place inside of us that feels inadequate and that feels that by judging somebody else, we can feel better, right? We know that psychologically. But from the point of spiritual or energetic ethics, we are actually choosing to co-create
Yeah.
polarized duality, which is the matrix, you could say.
Yeah.
It's the component of the matrix that holds it all together. So these are the kinds of things that, if you weren't if you weren't there that day that somebody mentioned that, you didn't get that. And then you have to learn the very hard way
Right.
by being judgmental for years and years and years and wondering why you're having so many problems.
I think you're absolutely on the money. I think you're right.
Mm.
Having an emotional body is a privilege,
Mhm.
a great
But it
privilege.
is something we need, and unfortunately, we don't get the kind of training from our most well-meaning parents and lineages on how to deal with our emotional body, how to take care of it.
Yeah.
I actually did a call not that long ago, the care and feeding of the emotional body,
Mhm.
because I was shown a couple of things and I wanted to share them.
Oh,
But
that's
we our upbringing, we all know everybody on this call is a sensitive, and gosh, the way it happens, we end up finding our sensitivities are a burden instead of the blessing that they are. So we just have to learn how to work with them.
yeah.
And yeah, that's in the basics too.
Yeah. So the care and feeding of the emotional body, emotional processing, which you do special labs for. You have your emotional
Mm.
processing labs.
Yeah, I do. Well, it's called the Processing Lab. It's a series. We meet twice a month, and we both invoke or utilize rather the marriage of spirit tools, which are mental processing. But if you know how to use them, it's mental, emotional, physical. Um, there's a mental component of perceiving a duality. If something's happening, okay, what's the opposite? How is this polarized dynamic creating problems? And then working with it, looking at it from the perspective of both the desire and the fear of each side of the polarity. So, like my favorite, because everybody can relate to it, is worthlessness and arrogance. So, there's a desire for worthlessness. Really? Yes. And a
Yes.
fear of worthlessness. Yes, we all know fear abuses. And there's a fear of arrogance
Mhm.
and a desire for arrogance. And of course, usually the desire for worthlessness is because we are afraid of being arrogant, right?
Right.
So we look at, when we use the marriage of spirit technique, we look at that and we just find in ourselves all the places where we are hooked in with either rejection or it's the spiritual teaching is being either attached or desires and fears, attachment and rejection. So we look at all the ways that we are invoking the dynamic, whatever side of the dynamic it is, and all the ways that we reject it. And then we use the ability to feel into the ascended balance state as part of offering it up. So when we do that kind of work, which is called a group square, we are using, it does affect the physical, it does affect the mental, it does affect the emotional, but you have to know how to do it. Otherwise you can get really just in the mental and then it's worthless as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
just
Then
thinking.
if you only get it mentally, you'll often just get more confused.
Yeah, yeah, because then you're like, I understand this. Why am I triggered? Why am I acting this
Yeah.
way? So it has to be all the way through. Yeah, so we do that, and then we do other, working with frozen children or working with. We just recently did a call where we were looking at dealing with entanglements, the energetic relationships that we have, where at a subtle level we're entangled with an energetic connection and
Yeah.
how to deal with that. And we're also going to start.
That one's juicy.
Yeah, it is juicy. Releasing entanglements, and we're
Right.
also going to. I'm going to have a friend come in and share another processing tool, Byron Katie's work, which is actually another thing that can look very superficial. It's not. It is very cool. And so she's going to come in and we're going to,
Oh, I love it.
bring that into it as well. So yeah, so it's a processing lab to learn as many tools as possible. So you've got things that you can turn to when you realize you've got something it's one of those, like you were talking about, one of those things, those boulders that has been pushed up
Yeah. Yeah.
and needs to be looked at. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also being with the emotional body and allowing more the approach that Lucia has. So all of these,
Mhm.
they're all valid tools. So that's working with a group where everybody's intention is to really, make the most of their time doing really authentic self-inquiry. So
Yeah,
I'm doing that processing lab and spiraling back on the basics. That's
absolutely. And
two
I've
main
also
things.
been drawn into the basics too. And over the past month, I was having trouble, what did source want me to bring through now?
Mm,
Is it going to be old stuff, new stuff? What? It dawned on me that one of the basics about how I do psychic seeing is vantage point. And this idea that every situation, every energy, every person, every consciousness, that you can put yourself there almost like peeking over someone's shoulder
mhm,
energetically, or using a lens. Literally, I use energy as like a lens. What do I see when I lift up this lens of worthlessness in my life? What do I see? Or if I
mhm,
don't want to look through the lens of worthlessness anymore, what do I see when I look through the energy of joy? It's this idea of new light, new sight. Kind of like if
mm,
you go into a black light room, right? Suddenly
mm.
you see all the little hairs all over you, or all the little spots on your skin, right? And
Uh,
it's the exact same way that I see. That's constantly how I see. And so this came up because a friend of mine was actually lamenting about how she was with this group of so-called, highly evolved people, and that they were very problematic. They had all these issues, and she had some big, deep reactions to the way that she was treated. And she said, "What do you see about this situation?" And I said, "Well, while you were talking, I energetically put myself in the vantage point of this man and this woman that you're talking about. And I could see that the man, everything he was doing, he was running it through a very core wound about being told that he was crazy when he was a kid.
Mm.
Incredible details of information that you'd only receive if you were willing to put your consciousness into a new vantage point. And same with the woman. I said, she, when you were talking about her, you said she had makeup and fake boobs. And and I said, so I put myself in her vantage point, peeking over her shoulder, and I saw this terror that she wouldn't be loved or liked.
Of course.
And
Yeah.
what this brought to the table was, and my friend is very advanced, and she said, my God, I had no idea how lacking in compassion and non-judgment I had been until just now. How do you do that?
Mm. Mm.
Well, that's exactly what I want to teach. So
Yeah.
on July 8th, I'm teaching a week long.
Mm.
This is my sweet husband giving me food. He feeds me. Um,
Hmm.
so so on July 8th, I'm going to teach a week long online course about cultivating non-judgment using the art of psychic lenses
That's
and
fantastic.
teaching people
Cool.
exactly how to shift lenses you don't want to use anymore and
Mm.
to use anything at all as a lens to receive better, more compassionate information about whatever you're doing in your life, how to apply it to 3D daily reality. And, you know, I I was so excited because non-judgment is actually something in anthropology that we're very highly trained in. You cannot function as an anthropologist, a human studying humans, without being in objectivity and non-judgment. It's the
Right.
first thing, yeah, the first thing that you are drilled on for years about how to do that. And then also combining that with the psychic part two, it's definitely a different, brand new sort of thing. I really haven't seen anybody do it this way, combining the
Mm.
academic part, the ethnographic part with the psychic part. And so this is how I've maintained non-judgment. It's a gift I have, but I get to give it now. And I'm so excited.
Oh, that is so cool. So beautiful. Well, that's how you are such a
Thank
darling,
you.
wonderful being. Yeah, yeah. Well, and you know what you were saying about um, that new lens, that's what I would call when we do the work with polarity, that's the ascended balance. So like with worthlessness and arrogance, the ascended balance, one of them would be humility, real humility, because real humility doesn't judge anything and doesn't need to, is not self-absorbed. It's not self-concerned. It is the doorway into oneness, one of them. I mean, actually, all those ascended states are doorways into oneness, but it's a powerful one. And
Right.
that gives you a different vantage point. So you
Does.
do the processing work and then you can see like Elizabeth,
Well, and
if you
also,
happen to be psychic.
yeah, and being able to just gently develop the psychic ability without
Mm,
a whole lot of pressure, but with real measurable outcomes emotionally and mentally that you can track and
mm,
tools that you can use in the moment, like when somebody's standing there yelling at you. How are you
mm,
going to be able to shift your vantage point? For example, my husband and I are best friends. Doesn't mean we don't fight. And on occasion, we'll fight. Like yesterday, we were trying to. These baby bunnies got out of their cage, so we had to go chase these bunnies down in the heat. And if you've ever tried to chase a baby bunny, it's not fun.
mm,
They're fast. And I snapped at him because he was because I had to go do this other. I was being interviewed on a different thing that's showing up in a couple of months, and so here I'm on my makeup in the heat with all my
It's
fancy clothes on, trying to catch these dang bunnies. And so I got snappy at him. And suddenly I realized, oh boy, I'm not seeing this from his point of view at all. And so I swapped my vantage point to look at it from Drew's perspective. And suddenly I just looked at him. I said, I'm really sorry I snapped at you. I know we're just trying to do the best we can at this moment with a bad situation. Immediately went from feeling grumpy to compassionate. And sometimes it's the other way around. Maybe if Drew or whomever is snappy at me, or my biggest trigger is my 4-year-old.
Oh dear.
She can project energy like nobody. And all she has to do is just stand there and stare at me, and she just projects energy, right?
We'll have to take her in hand when she's old enough to
Yeah,
tell her
exactly.
how to use that energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I actually sat her down. I'm like, I always let them know you're so powerful. You don't realize how powerful you are. Let me talk to you about this. And they get it a lot of times. But I'll have to switch my vantage point. What is Kindle seeing right now? What is she experiencing right now? All she sees is that mommy has to work again. And she hates that. Of course she hates it. Because that means I'm locked away doing whatever or gone. And for her, she has this love language of acts of service. That's her love language. So if I don't have time to serve her, she's my little royal, by the way. If I don't have time to serve her, she feels absolutely unloved in that moment. And so recognizing that, I was able to set her aside and say, sometimes I can serve you and I will. And I love doing that for you. Sometimes I need you to be a big girl and get your clothes on by yourself, because she can, but she literally likes it when I put her clothes on for her. She was a queen somewhere for sure.
Oh God. Oh, I remember my son when he was little, he hated me dressing him, especially putting sweaters over his head. Oh my God.
The opposite, right?
Just the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah.
When he
And
was little.
so for Kindle, it's like, oh, I really do want to serve you. But for her to hear that, I do want to do this for you. Sometimes I can't, but I really want to.
Sweet.
And that shifted her. She really understood that. And ever
Yeah.
since then, that was like several days ago, but ever since then, all this week, she's been so different, because it dawned on her that what my vantage point was, that I do want to. It's not that I don't want to, it's that I don't have time, and that I'm also, she doesn't get what being the breadwinner means. And
Yeah.
she
Of
doesn't
course.
need to right now. But anyway,
But so
that's like a
you're gonna
3D
do that?
example.
Yeah. So you're gonna teach a 7-day course on that.
Yeah, an
Fantastic.
online course.
Yeah.
Yeah, with beautiful PDFs and videos, and just getting people this very complete way of doing things. And where we're starting is self-judgment, because that's key. If you're going to cultivate non-judgment, you have to be able to have compassion for yourself.
That's
And
usually the last one that people get to. Is
that's right. And we're not
they
going to,
stop judging everybody else, but they're still judging themselves.
we got to start with us first. We
Yeah.
will begin with us first. That's absolutely key. Yeah, I believe that.
Fantastic. Beautiful. That's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm
Love
really
you.
excited.
Yeah.
Good. So
Mm.
what are some of the things that people can do right now? What are, off the top of your head, what are some of the tips that people can do right now to do some self-care energetically? You mentioned, don't give up meditating every day, that your brain
Mm.
really will use that to build new structures, and new structures in the brain allow more light in. That's
Exactly. And consciousness to shift. And it's not just the brain. I mean, there have
right.
been studies ever for, I mean, they started doing them 50 years ago. studies on the effect of meditation on the body, on the brain, on the emotions. And it's measurable. It's measurable. It's measurable what happens when you had 70 people meditating together during a solstice event. I really could relate to your description of your experience. I mean, I was at a different vantage point in a different way, but there was that same explosive connected to the cosmos and Gaia, that same, yeah. So I mean, it's really important. I mean, I can't believe how many people who are pretty far along on their journey and they still don't meditate every day. It
Right.
doesn't have to be an hour, but if you can do, in fact, it's better if you do a half an hour of really very deep meditation rather than an hour of kind of spacing out. Um, but also, just the kind of thing you were talking about, like I'll tell you what happened when actually, if I could remember exactly what happened, when I realized I needed to talk about the care and feeding of the emotional body. I realized there was an emotion that was triggered. I can't remember. Maybe it was outrage. I can't remember what it was, but I got to see in that moment what it did to the emotional body. Shredded it, shredded it,
Yes.
shredded the fibers. I mean, the fine, subtle fibers, they're not physical fibers like the subtle level, like the fascia, that can be shredded too in the body. That's very subtle, but this is energetic, shredded. And I was like, oh boy, when you know that there are certain emotional things, they'll come up, and if you can let them go really quickly, they don't hurt you. But somehow when we get stuck on them, we kind of keep with them, they really shred the emotional body. So, doing the processing work, whatever forms work best for you, allow you to clear there's deep emotional wounding from when we're young. But there are also just patterns of self-limiting thoughts that we have and hold in our subconscious. All of this stuff causes us to be triggered into reaction when we're relating. And our ego is the vehicle for relating to the world, for relating to existence on this planet, other people. So, I mean, working with any tools that work for you allow you to, have a different kind of relationship with your emotional body. There's like so much, and it's actually getting really late around here. So I don't know.
Gotcha.
Uh,
So let's take
yeah.
a couple questions before you have to run, because I
Okay.
know you're probably hungry.
Yeah,
Okay.
I am actually.
Hey, I'm
It's
psychic.
7 o'clock.
Okay.
Hmm.
So let's see. Susan asks, is it just me, or does the energy exchanges feel more broad, if you will, especially these last couple of weeks? I'm feeling more love from folks and less defined as to the source, more ecumenical to me. Are we majorly shifting? I think, yeah, Susan, definitely. Oh, she was saying any love that's not love, any energy that's not love based. I think, yeah, we are in a shift. You're going to start to see certain things show up a lot more than others. And it's all going to be highly subtle. And yes, I definitely see, we're going to see if there's some questions we might get to on the Q&A board too. And Kathy asks, how does prayer work when you're asking for consent? So you know how like people will say, well, I'll pray for you.
Right.
And maybe no one asked you to pray for them or whatever. My take on that is that you're right. Technically, if someone didn't ask you, they didn't give consent. It's something we're so used to, yet at the same time.
I'm not so sure about. I think it's not the same as um, energetically shifting something for somebody, looking into their personal space. I think prayer is actually, what is it? It's praying for light, for health, for well-being. I mean, it does get dicey if you're like praying for a specific thing for somebody because it may not be in their highest good. So to pray for whatever is going to serve their highest purpose is then not trying to use your energy to restrict or define what's going to happen for people. So I think, praying for the animals, praying for, of course, the animals would prefer us to just clean up ourselves. They're
Right.
actually doing okay. I have
Yeah.
lots of information from the animals, and so does my friend Anna Bradenbuck. But
Yeah, she's the
yeah,
best.
yeah. So I think just it's probably, if you're concerned, it's probably better to always make sure you're praying for the highest possible outcome for whatever is going to serve that person the most. And I remember when when we were doing that whole, when Lucia and Nalini and I were doing the uh, unplugging the patriarchy. Every time we sat, I would always start by invoking, okay, let us be used in whatever is going to be, you
Whatever the
know,
highest, most
and I
benevolent.
can't, and I'm not the one to determine what that really is.
Right.
Sometimes a
That's
car smash is the highest.
yeah, that's the shift from free will to divine will there. Absolutely.
Mm, mm, yeah.
Um, this is a really good question here. Belinda, I do see your question about interference. I think I'd like to address that in a different platform. How much interference are we getting from angels or star families? That one's definitely interesting. Um, that I might even just do a whole thing on that.
Yeah,
um,
count me in on that one.
right, sure. So Moria asks, when I hear the word processing, and you're not alone, Moria, I completely shut down. I don't have
Mm.
willingness to put forth that much energy, and I think there must be an easier way to clear yourself. What do you suggest I do to either do the work I need to do without processing or clear the blocks doing clearing work this way? My first reaction, Moria, is um, keep welcoming that resistance. The resistance itself is the boulder. The feeling of being shut down, welcome that. Keep welcoming it. Don't stop welcoming it. Watch it dissolve eventually, and then baby steps. And also see if you can set yourself up in like a processing lab with Victoria, where you're around a group of people who are in a state of willingness. You might be able to absorb some of that energy to help you along. Those are the two things I think of. What do you think of, Victoria?
Well, having resisted processing very willfully for many years when I was first introduced to it, I would just say I do understand. I think of processing as structured self-inquiry. Is it really, that's what it is it's self-inquiry. And it can be threatening, and it's threatening to the part of the ego that feels like it's responsible to protect us
Mhm.
because it feels like it's somehow being sidelined, and it's not. It's really bringing clarity to it. It's not getting rid of an ego, it's bringing it into a place of clarification and so that it's not driven by self-limiting beliefs. But I do understand. I hated the idea. I was like, I'm just going to let the white light of eternity clear out everything. But unfortunately, I realized sooner or later, this was about 25 years ago, 20 years ago, I realized after a short period of time that actually I was missing out on the kind of progress I could be making. And my desire to wake up fully was, in the end, stronger than my resistance to processing. And I think, yeah, that's a good idea. I think it can be, it doesn't have to be a big drag. It doesn't have to be heavy and it's not about judging ourselves. It's about looking at our foibles with a sense of humor, actually, and from a place of witnessing them and going, "Oh, I'm doing that. Oh, well, that's probably because my mother told me all the time when I was little that I was selfish." And so I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm selfish." This is one of my experiences.
Yes.
I took it on. I decided, okay, I'm selfish.
Yep.
And I was like, and I, no matter how much stuff I did for other people, I couldn't prove to myself that I wasn't selfish. I had this belief. It was a self-limiting belief. So I had to process it.
Yeah.
And my mom, she wasn't trying to hurt me. She was trying to protect me from what she saw as my innate selfishness.
Hmm. Absolutely.
So we get these beliefs about ourselves, and then we see them and we go, "Oh my God, I'm just a human being who can sometimes be selfish, but I'm not really defined by that thing."
Yeah,
So, yeah.
absolutely. And then uh, I think there's also people who are in resistance to meditating too. What tips
Yeah.
tips do you have about that? Because definitely
I
processing
would
and
just say
meditation are
take a
different.
yeah, take a look at the research. Well, first of all, I think if you learn how to meditate, if you really learn how to meditate in silence, how to go within. There are ways. I've actually been playing with a lot of different ways of encouraging settling into a state of meditation. Um, but if you pay attention to the research, I mean, how can we not? Um, if something is proven to actually bring our frequencies into coherence and cause our we have these different brains, the frontal brain, frontal cortex, and the limbic brain, and the what we call, it's not really, but we call it the reptilian brain. I mean, we have all this fantastic, and it's capable of so much more than we use just a little minute part of it. um, and if meditating daily is going to allow that to become something more expanded and wonderful, and why would we not do that? It's not such a drag. It's actually lovely. It's actually fun. It's
Yeah,
actually
and
fun.
for those of us who might have trouble doing it alone because our monkey brain gets in the way or whatever, doing it in a group can often be the thing that moves that monkey brain aside, because
Mhm.
again then you're mapping to, or that's sort of a mysticism term, you're mapping to or you're matching the energy around you, especially if you get to spend some time with Victoria, for example, and meditate with her, even if you're on the computer or on a phone call with her and you're in meditation. That energy that comes from her is palpable. It's something
Mhm.
that the empaths can feel, the seers can see, the knowers can know, and it's
Mm.
there, it's a gift. So being around someone who's masterful, especially like you, Victoria,
Thank
every
you.
time I've ever been able to meditate on the phone with you, it's always been profound and
Mm. Mm.
very different than, say, meditating with Lucia. Um,
Mm.
and and it then it, like, even just today hearing about that subtle energy, you naming it, allowed me to see it and feel it, and now I want it. I'm like, "Oh, I
Yeah,
want that."
I mean, I really do. I think that's why I want to do this spiraling back on the basics thing. I think that a lot of us have ideas about meditation, and I think there are several approaches to meditation that if you just do them and you just like, everybody has a mind that chatters and chatters and chatters. But like, I did find that using a mantra, which I'm going to teach people how to do. I mean, I was a trained TM teacher. I can't do that anymore. I'm no longer affiliated with the Transcendental Meditation movement. That was 40 years ago or something. I left, or 35 years ago or something. But I can tell people how to use a mantra and give them some, show them what some of
Yes.
the mantras are. Um, or the what is it? Mindfulness based stress reduction, just being with the breath for 20 minutes twice a day.
Right. Mhm.
Those things work. I mean, yes, the mind is a monkey mind and it monkeys around and it does its little jumping around things. But if you just return to the breath, or you just return to this sense of the mantra, or you just return to, for some people who've meditated a lot in other lives, which some of you probably on this call have, there's this ground of being, there's this meditation that's always there.
Wow.
And to just be invited to just, breathe. And I mean, I think it's important to I think how you sit matters.
Yeah.
I think feeling uh, feeling the breath at the back of the body and opening the back of the heart, and opening the, I mean, there are things that I feel help and that I always do with people. But then, once you've like really found this alignment that allows you to feel this central channel, everybody has it,
Right.
even if your mind is going crazy.
Mhm.
Um, and you just sort of invite yourself, try it right now, Elizabeth. Invite yourself to just drop into that meditation, that level of meditation that's always happening. It's
Oh,
like a
yeah.
river, subterranean river that's always flowing. And
Yeah,
all you
you're
have to
right.
do is drop right into it. So, there are lots of approaches to take. And I think a lot of people, they've never been they've never learned. I was just really lucky that, when I wanted to learn how to meditate, because I wanted to be able to have all the energy in the world and be as thin, as anorexically thin as possible without taking drugs. That's why I started meditating. Well, that was what was in my mind. My soul was like pushing me. But that's why I started meditating. Um, and I just did it for that reason. And over time, I learned what it was really all about. And it's amazing. And we all have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
We all have minds that think. That's not a
Mhm.
problem. I think sometimes if somebody tells you, you must just stop thinking,
Right.
like, okay, I think I'll go listen to music instead.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's probably not the best. I mean, I guess in some very strict traditions, that's what works. But I'm all for sitting well. I mean, I
Yeah.
can really help people sit
Posture,
well, but I'm
breathing.
not into, slapping people in the back with a stick just because,
Thank
you
God.
know,
We do
yeah.
appreciate that.
Even metaphorically. Yeah.
Right.
So
One
I
last
think, yeah.
question is,
Mm.
where can people access all of this? Your website is emanationofpresence.org.
Presence.org, right. Emanationofpresence.org. Or I think I still have Victoria Moore, and Moore is spelled with one O, .org, which
Okay.
probably I should shift to because emanation of presence is pretty long. That
I'll
was an idea
I'll
I
be
had 5
posting
years ago.
yeah. I'm
Pardon?
gonna post both. I'm gonna send everybody the replay link,
Mm,
which is on
okay,
YouTube. This was streamed live on YouTube, and I'll post both on YouTube for you all. And in an email, I'll be sending those two links to everybody too. I'm also going to send
cool.
a link um, to the class that I'm teaching on July 8th if you'd like to join me, that week-long online course that you can do in your own free time and get online support when you want it. which is really nice. We'll do 2 live calls as well for that
Mm.
week. And so that everyone can play around with the spiraling back to the basics, the processing lab that Victoria is teaching, and looking at cultivating non-judgment. So these are all what's come through us
Mhm.
right now is what's most needed is just what we, again, moving our free will out of the way, allowing divine will to come through and say, this is what's needed right now. And
Right.
very precious work. And we'll let you go eat. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody.
Really enjoyed this very much. Your light
I
is
know.
pure and beautiful. You're beautiful. And if I could hug you,
Oh, well, I feel the same way about you. Yeah. Yeah, and I remembered when your friend said, "And that woman had all this makeup on and false boobs," and I'm like, "Uh-oh, both Elizabeth and I put on makeup
right?
for this today." But anyway, yeah, it's been lovely, and we'll have to do it again. Yeah,
Oh, I can't wait. Thank you so much. And thank you all of you who joined us live. We so appreciate it. We feel you.
yeah.
And I
Mm,
know I wasn't able to get to all the questions, but really good ones. Thank you so much for your presence. We are so glad you came. And bless you
yeah,
all.
yeah.
Namaste, Victoria. Have a
Namaste.
beautiful dinner.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.